She didn't disappear. She didn't scream. She didn't run. There was no blood, no broken door, no sign of struggle. She just stopped appearing at her window, and that small, silent absence was the only cry for help she had left. By the time I understood what that window really meant, I had to sit in my car for 10 minutes before I could go back inside the precinct. Not because the case was graphic, not because it was violent, because it was 6 years of absolute terror, and not a single person had noticed, including me. This is a case that changed the way I look at every quiet street, every drawn curtain, every neighbor who waves and smiles and never quite meets your eyes. This is the case I think about when people tell me nothing dangerous ever happens in small towns. Stay with me, because the most important reveal in this story doesn't come at the end. It comes when you realize you already knew something was wrong, and you ignored it too. My name is Elias Ward. I spent 19 years as a homicide detective in Fairfax County, Virginia. I've stood in rooms that would give you nightmares for a decade. I've held evidence bags containing things I won't describe here. I've notified families, too many families, that someone they loved was not coming home. But this case didn't start with a body. It started with a phone call about a woman who wasn't standing at her window. Her name was Claire Ashworth, 41 years old, a high school art teacher, divorced, no children. She lived alone in a pale blue Victorian house on Sutter Lane. The kind of house that looks like it belongs on a postcard, with white shutters and a wraparound porch in a garden she tended every Saturday morning without fail. But it wasn't the garden that her neighbors talked about. It was the window, every single night. And I mean every night. Claire Ashworth would stand at the second floor window of her bedroom, facing the street between 10 and 10:30 in the evening. She'd stand there for exactly 20 minutes. Sometimes she held a cup of tea. Sometimes she just watching the street, watching the parked cars, watching the dark. Her neighbors had noticed it for years. At first it seemed a little strange. Then it became normal. Then it became expected. Like a streetlight switching on, like a dog barking at the mail truck. It was just what Claire did. Nobody ever asked why. In this job, I've learned one rule above all others. When nobody asks why, that is exactly when you should. The call came in on a Tuesday in October. A neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Donna Marsh, called a non-emergency line just after 7 in the morning. She sounded calm, but her voice had a quality I've heard more times than I can count. The voice of someone working very hard not to fall apart. She said, "I don't know if this is something, but Claire didn't stand at her window last night. She stood there every night for 6 years, and she's not answering her door." I was on my second coffee at my desk when the call was routed to me. My partner, a sharp woman named Reza Nakamura, raised an eyebrow when I grabbed my jacket. "Missing person?" she asked. "Maybe nothing." I said, "It was not nothing." The front door of Claire's house was locked. The lights inside were off. Her car, a silver Subaru with a cracked rear bumper, was in the driveway. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Silence. It was Reza who caught it first. A small detail. The kind your eyes slide right past unless your brain is wired to snag on things that don't fit. The welcome mat in front of the door. It was upside down. I stared at it for a moment. Then I looked at Reza. She was already on the radio. We got in through a side window that wasn't latched. And that detail alone told me something important. A woman who stood at her window every night for 6 years. A woman clearly on guard. And she'd left the window unlatched. Either she had left in a hurry, or she was past caring. The house smelled like lavender and something else underneath it. Something chemical. Wrong in a way your body recognizes before your brain does. We found her in the bedroom. Claire Ashworth was alive. Barely. Fully clothed. Lying on top of the covers. Non-responsive. An empty bottle of prescription sleeping pills on the nightstand. A glass of water. And beside the glass, a single piece of paper, folded once. She survived. 3 days in intensive care, then a psychiatric hold. The note said only this: "He found me. I can't do it anymore. I'm sorry. He found me." 3 words. And they split this case open like a fault line. While Claire was unconscious in the hospital, I started pulling threads. The divorce, 8 years prior. Husband's name, Marcus Ashworth. They had been married for 9 years. The divorce records listed no specific cause, but 6 months after papers were signed, I found a restraining order. Claire had filed it citing harassment and stalking. It had been granted. It had run for 2 years. Then it expired. Standard procedure. I looked up Marcus Ashworth. Here is where it gets interesting. In 8 years, Marcus Ashworth had moved 17 times. 17. He'd lived across 6 different states. No steady employment on record. Rent paid in cash. No social media presence. No digital footprint to speak of. And let me be very clear about what that means. In this era, having no digital footprint is not an accident. That is deliberate. That takes work. That is someone who has decided consciously that the less trace he leaves, the better. The question is always, better for whom? I drove to his last known address, a motel on Route 9, 30 minutes outside Marin's Creek. Room 14, paid in cash. Checked in 4 days before Claire stopped standing at her window. The room was empty, stripped clean, but the motel owner, a quiet man named Frank who watched everything through a panel of bulletproof glass. He remembered Marcus. He pulled the check-in log without me asking. And then he said something that turned the temperature in the room down by 10 degrees. He said, "Quiet guy, real polite. Asked me if I knew the area. Asked about a specific street." He said, "Sutter Lane. I need to stop here and walk you through what we eventually piece together, because the full picture is more disturbing than it first appears. It is the kind of thing that changes how you see ordinary behavior forever." Claire had not simply been hiding from Marcus. She had been running a surveillance operation from inside her own home. The window ritual, standing at the same spot at the same time every single night, was not insomnia. It was not a quirk or a habit. It was a system, a deliberate, carefully constructed early warning system that she had built herself, because the official systems had failed her. She told me this herself weeks later, when she was well enough to sit across a table and speak without her hands shaking. She said, "If I could see the street, I would know if he was there, if he was watching. I needed to see him before he saw me. That was the only way I could sleep." 6 years. 6 years of standing sentinel at that window, every night, holding a cup of tea, scanning the dark. 6 years of being her own protection. 2 weeks before she stopped appearing, she had spotted a car she didn't recognize sitting on her street 3 nights in a row. Always after dark. Always gone by morning. She hadn't called the police because she had no proof. Because she had called before and nothing had happened. Because she was exhausted, bone deep exhausted, from being the woman who kept warning everyone about the man nobody else could see. So she made the only choice that still felt like it belonged to her. We arrested Marcus Ashworth 4 days later at a Greyhound station in Roanoke. In his jacket pocket, Claire's current phone number, her employer, her home address, her license plate number, handwritten notes on her daily schedule, what time she left for school, what time she returned, which nights she ordered food delivery. 8 years of documentation. A file on a woman who had spent 6 of those years trying to make sure he could never find her. During interrogation, Marcus was calm, pleasant, even. He smiled throughout. He said he had never hurt Claire. He said he only wanted to talk. He said he loved her. I have interviewed many dangerous people in my career. I have learned to recognize the ones who genuinely cannot see that what they're doing is wrong. That is not a comforting thing to observe. It is, in fact, the most frightening thing I know, because a man who understands he has crossed a line can, in theory, be reached. A man who is completely certain of his own righteousness, who believes his obsession is love, his surveillance is devotion, his pursuit is patience. That man does not stop. Marcus Ashworth was charged with aggravated stalking, violation of a prior restraining order, and criminal harassment. 18 months later, he pleaded guilty to reduced charges. He served 2 years. 2 years. Here is the part that genuinely keeps me awake. After his release, I kept tabs on Marcus informally, because sometimes a case gets into you, and you cannot let it go all the way. He moved to Nevada, then Oregon, then Washington State. As far as I know, he never contacted Claire again. But here's what I think about. Somewhere in those states, in whatever town he settled in, there is a woman. Maybe she works at a coffee shop he visits every morning. Maybe she lives 2 houses down. Maybe she smiled at him once in a parking lot and never thought about it again. Maybe she has no idea. Claire Ashworth eventually left Marin's Creek. She moved to a small coastal town in Maine. I don't know exactly where, and that is intentional. She still teaches art. We speak occasionally. Not often. Last Christmas, she sent me a card with a small painting she'd made of the Virginia mountains. No message inside, just a painting. I keep it on my desk. I keep it because it reminds me that survival is not only about staying alive. Survival is rebuilding the part of yourself that someone tried to dismantle quietly, systematically, over years, in a way the law barely has language for. And it reminds me why, on the hard days, I still do this. Somewhere there's a woman in a pale blue house in a town I will never name, standing at her window at 10 o'clock at night. Not because she has to, because she finally can. Resources for this episode are in the description. I'm Detective Elias Ward. I'll see you in the next case.